Hello, everybody, and welcome into the 40th edition of Texas Longhorns Live. We really appreciate you being here. Please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below. As I added down below, it says we are 12 subscriptions away from 3,000. So we really appreciate you guys for doing that. So please do that on the race to 3,000. Hopefully we get there and then we'll jump into that next milestone. So please do that. Also, guys, can you go over and join the Old Miss channel? It really helps out our road there. Again, once you get up to 1,000 subs, if you don't want to be a part anymore, do that. Then unsubscribe. That's fine. But for now, please join us. In the comments, I dropped that link, so please go over and join Leanne and then also Mark over there. They deliver great content, a lot of recruiting content as well. She actually dropped a video on here about Texas, so I hope you guys enjoyed that. Also, please, again, use the Amazon link in the description. Does not change the buying process or experience. I really appreciate that. And then also, Mark's going live right now. So once you're done with us, go ahead and check him out. I still think he's going live from the Michigan versus Ohio State show that was scheduled today. So go over there and check that out. Thank you for that, guys. And let's jump into this. I've seen a lot of people mention, a lot of lists being brought out about this. Where does Steve Sarkisian rank among SEC head coaches? Gerald, we both created our list. Let's start at the bottom, and then we get to Sark. We can dive into that. And if we cross over here at 16, that's fine. One of us will hit on it, and then we'll move on to 15, so on and so forth if we do cross over. So number 16, Gerald, who is your 16th best coach in the SEC?
It's hard for me, but as it stands right now, I think I got to go Jeff Lebby, just based on what we saw in the field. And my personal feelings on Jeff Lebby aside, I just think the job he did last year, it didn't seem like he was maximizing the talent they had. And again, I just don't. It was a weird move by them, and I think it's probably trying to get back to some of what Leach was doing. And so it was kind of like who's available that's kind of Leach-ish. But I honestly and ultimately don't think it's going to work out. Now, I could be wrong. And you know what? That'd be great for Mississippi State fans. Again, my personal feelings aside, I love it when all the teams on the schedule are good. So, but right now I've got Jeff Lebby at 16.
Yeah, so we agree here. I agree with you literally on everything you said, so there's not much more to say other than even when this hire was done, I said this was a bad hire. I didn't think he was a great coordinator, and to me, if you're hiring a coordinator that's never had a head coaching experience, they have to be great. I don't think he is, so he's my 16th head coach as well. Let's go to 15. 15 for me is Mark Stoops. Gigantic fall for grace from him, in my opinion. This is guy, by the way, stealing from Kentucky, getting paid like $10 million a year. And I agree in the past, he has won 8 games at Kentucky. That is hard to do, especially multiple years in a row. This team, and he's made them relevant, honestly, in the SEC. But the last couple of years, they have really struggled. And I'm going to say this year, I think they're going to be just as bad as they were last year. They really haven't figured out the quarterback situation. The recruiting has kind of gone downhill. And the transfer portal haul was really bad. They lost way more talent than they brought in. So he's my 15th.
Yeah, and I think it's not a good look when you're on a downward turn and you're very openly flirting with other jobs. Like, it's just on top of the on-the-field struggles, like trying to get out of Dodge when things are going poorly. It's just an all-around bad look. And again, Mark Stoops may be a victim of his own success, right? I feel like he has elevated the level of expectation at Kentucky to now a point where it's probably unsustainable at what he's able to do. So it's a very weird situation to be in where he has gotten them to that point, but now he cannot get past that point. And so he's kind of a victim of his own success.
100%. Who's your 15th? Is it the same?
I've got, my 15 was the same, Mark Stoops. Yeah, I'm with
you. Okay. Number 14, who's your 14th then?
14, I've got Mike Elko. And this is probably a little rivalry motivated and maybe too soon to call, but I just did not see, especially offensively, it felt like the entire offensive scheme was mismanaged. And yeah, there's things with the offensive line, there's things with quarterback situation, but it just felt like the CEO aspect of running an offense was just not there. And he's a defensive coach, and they brought in a guy who has Aggie DNA and all of that. But as someone from the outside looking in, they paid a lot of money to get rid of Jimbo Fisher. And in year one, we got basically Jimbo Fisher results. A lot of close losses, a very similar record to what we have with Jimbo. On some of their biggest games, they just didn't show up. To me, especially like I take context into account with this. When you pay that much to get rid of a guy and you bring in your guy, like you need to see almost an immediate jump. Year zero does not exist anymore, especially with what A&M has to do now. There's probably something to be said about money that would be paid for NIL deals and for portal guys being tied up and getting rid of Jimbo. But as it stands right now, based on what we've seen on the field, I've got Elko pretty low on the list.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. Anywhere from like, I think the top 6 are locked in. I would be surprised if we don't have the top 6 in like similar order, but anywhere from 7 to 14 is going to be interchangeable to me. I think you could rise someone all the way up there. I think you drop them all the way to 14. 15, 16, I feel the same way. I think those are the 2 worst coaches in the SEC. I don't think that's really up for debate, in my opinion. Number 14, I have Sam Pittman.
Yeah, I'd Sam Pittman at I'd say Pittman at 13. So we're pretty close there, and we'll vamp until Matthew makes it back. But Sam Pittman is a guy who it's hard for me to put Sam Pittman in this position on the list, specifically because Sam Pittman is such a stinking likable guy, right? Sam Pittman is a guy you want to cheer for, you want to have in your corner, you want to be in his corner. I love that style of football, that old school run it down your throat, beat you down kind of style of football. And this is me as a Texas fan. We're rivals, right? It's hard for me to praise rivals, but I have Sam Pittman right above where Matthew had him at 14. I have him at 13. Next, I've got Hugh Freeze. And I think for me, this is simply motivated because, again, you've got an opportunity to come in and you hire a guy because he can beat Alabama. And again, it's year one, right? We have to wait for results, but all of these year one coaches just did not impress me that much. So I was not a fan of what Hugh Freeze put on the field. And again, I think for what we expected from him coming in, what they're able to do and what he's been able to do in the portal and with recruiting. I mean, again, he is we'll call it an early adopter or maybe a beta tester of NIL. So we know what he's able to do, what he's capable of doing, but we have not seen it from him yet. So moving up the list for me, next we're talking about Sam Pittman and Hugh Freeze. I've got Brent Venables up next on my list again, and this is because I just feel like OU can and should and has the resources to be better than what they put on the field last year, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And now, again, Brent Venables is a defensive coach, and that defense was a monster last year. That defense is the reason why they won most of the games they won. But when we see the amount of talent they have, when we see they didn't have a single healthy wide receiver all year, so it's really hard to judge the offense. But again, like you can't really prepare for having 6, 7, 8, 9 guys hurt in that wide receiver room. But when the opportunity presented itself, like it felt like OU just couldn't get over the hump. Now, I'm a believer that OU has too many resources, has too much going for them, has too much history. And again, this is me as a Texas fan, right? As a Texas supporter, Texas grad, right? OU has been good basically my entire adult life, right? For my entire life, there have been more ups than downs. And so seeing OU in this position, it's hard to say that it's anything but the leadership. Now, part of that can be said for the coach that left them in the lurch. Part of it can be said for the positioning that they're in currently going into the SEC. But again, in year one in the SEC, it was not an impressive outing from Brent Venables. I did not see what I want. I did not see what I hoped to see from them. They need to get better on the offensive side of the ball. It looks like he's going to be dialing in on the defensive side of the ball based upon all of the changes that did or did not happen. So I'm really going to need to see. And the thing for me that really threw up the red flag for what's going on at OU is it feels like there's a lot of people trying to avoid or flee a sinking ship. And that it sucks to say it out loud. Like I'm not trying to be harsh or try to be rude, but like at some point, like it looks like and feels like guys are fleeing the sinking ship, right? They're even there are talks of coaches leaving, there are talks of coaches not coming in there. They're again top tier players going in the transfer portal. So for me, that is a red flag. That is part of the job of being a head coach at this level. And so I really wanted to see more because again, even as a rival, right? For me, it is better when OU is good. It is better when A&M is good. And so maybe I judge them really harshly, too harshly, because again, the resources they have, the history they have, what they're able to do, what they should be putting on the football field. And especially, again, as a Texas fan, the position that we're currently in, I just hope to see more from them. So moving up the list, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10. We're in the top 10 right now. I've got Eli Drinkwitz. And this is another one where I feel like Eli Drinkwitz has a lot of opportunity to be really exceptional, right? Eli Drinkwitz is a guy who I think is a great recruiter, is a guy who has an opportunity to build. He's got a lot of talent coming in, more talent than Missouri's been able to have in the past. But again, we saw a fall off. We didn't see that level of production from them that we should have. The level of talent did not match what we got from them. Matthew's back, which is great. Matthew, I just kind of kept going through my list. So I talked about Elko, and we were on 14, I think, when you left us.
You're good.
So Matthew, I think we're on. I want to hear your 14.
Okay, if you can hear me, because Wi-Fi is having issues. Number 14 for me is Sam Pittman. I don't know. I think he's plateaued. I think everything he's accomplished there is great, and I think he's done a good job for what Arkansas expects, honestly, but I don't see it getting any better. I just think the time is up for him, honestly. And you kind of saw he had his best years when he had his best coordinators, and this was kind of that year as well with Bobby Petrino. So I don't think he's that great of a head coach. I think it just depends on the coordinators and who they are. So I think they have to get rid of him. That's my opinion on number 14. Have you made it up any further, Gerald?
Yeah, so I got through a couple more, so let's hear your 13 and 12 as well.
Okay, number 13 for me, I literally have this crossed off like 4 times. I have Brent Venables here. I just think Brent Venables at the program he's at Oklahoma, the expectations are sky high as they should be, because if you look at the history of Oklahoma has very few down years. They definitely don't have down decades. They just have a couple down years in between every decade, once every, 40, 50 years. And Brent Venables has inherited a decent roster, and they haven't gotten any better. I would say they've stayed about the same of what I expected, honestly, because they did have important pieces leave when Lincoln Riley left. That has to be said as a Texas fan. But, you go 6-7, 10-2, 6-7. I don't know. I just don't think he's that good. I think he was honestly carried the 1 year by Dylan Gabriel. Now, it's kind of funny because he's either had a really good quarterback in Dylan Gabriel, or he's had like crap quarterbacks. So it's going to be very interesting. If like John Mateer can just be good, what are they? If John Mateer's great, then I think you're probably going to get a 9 or 10 win team. If he's bad, you may get 6-7. So I don't know what to say about Brent Venables. Have you done you said 12 as well. So yeah. Number 12 for me is Hugh Freeze. Another guy I just don't know where to put. Very confusing for me, like really good at Liberty, really good at Ole Miss. But let's be honest here. He was playing unfair football at Ole Miss because he was really the only one paying people crazy amounts of money. Do I think other people were paying people? Yeah. Do I think they were getting what they were getting at Ole Miss? No, that's why they went to Ole Miss. Let's be honest about it. And now everyone can play. And so far he's been bad. And then the decision making, like I didn't think Peyton Thorne was good. But you know what I said? I said, you know what? Hugh Freeze, I think, knows his quarterback, so I'll trust him. And Peyton Thorne wasn't good again. So you went all in on Peyton Thorne after having a bad year from Peyton Thorne. I don't understand that. Then you got in the portal and you get a guy in Jackson Arnold who's underachieved tremendously. So I don't understand that. So I have to put him at 12. I just don't understand his thinking on the quarterback. And I don't really honestly, his offense has been subpar as well, even with bad quarterback play. But that's on him. The first year I can put on Peyton Thorne. The second year is on you. You saw who Peyton Thorne was and you still decided to go with Peyton Thorne.
Yeah, you and I had all of those in different order, but same grouping, right? So I think I had Freeze, Pittman, and Venables in that order as well. So like, yeah, I'm with you on all of those. Especially Hugh Freeze, I called him a beta user of NIL is what I called him, to put it delicately. But yeah, I'm with you there. Again, you bring him in because he's a recruiter and because he can beat Alabama, and I don't see the fruit bearing itself out right there. I started on my number 11, which was Venables. So yeah, I talked about Brent Venables. Again, I feel like OU has the resources, has what they need to be better. They should have been better. They can be better. OU's not a he is the first OU head coach in like 20 or 30 years to have multiple losing seasons. Like that is the level that OU has been at, and Brent Venables just has not been there. And that's my period, like end of sentence for Brent Venables.
No, I don't disagree with that. My number 11 is Billy Napier. I think you could argue him a bit higher. I think you could argue him a bit lower. I actually had him basically at this spot last year. To me, this is similar to where I felt Brian Kelly was in his tenure at LSU compared to Billy Napier at Florida, because I had Brian Kelly at, I believe, 2 on my SEC coaches list last year because of what he had done at Notre Dame. I thought he's been solid at LSU. But I said if there's anyone that can fall a lot, it's Brian Kelly. And if there's anyone that can raise up to that number 1 spot, it's Brian Kelly. I don't think obviously Billy Napier can get to number 1, but I think if with a good year here, I could put him as like the 5th best coach in the SEC. I could easily do that. I think he's been okay at Florida. Obviously has not been up to Florida standards of the greatness and excellence they expect. But let's be honest here, pre-Urban Meyer, pre-Steve Spurrier, Florida wasn't that great of a program. So I think he's been, like I said, okay. I think DJ Lagway, to me, if underachieving would be anything less than 9 wins this year, I think this team should go 9-3. So I have him at 11. Again, you could argue him as low as, I think, 14. I think you could argue him somewhere up to probably number 9 or 8. I think that's the highest you could argue him up right now, but he is my 11th best coach as of this moment.
Yeah, I've got Drinkwitz there, and I was talking about him as you came in. I think, again, with what the talent that he brought in, they had a ton of talent at Missouri, and they just did not produce, right? And that, again, ultimately falls on the head coach. You get all the momentum of the recruiting, you get on camera, and you get the big recruiting wins, and then it falls flat. I actually have Napier 1 spot higher at number 10. So, and I'm with you there. Like, DJ Lagway is the truth. He is the future of that program. And I think Billy Napier's ranking and rating as an SEC coach goes as high as DJ Lagway goes. And again, it is a quarterback league. Next year is going to be so quarterback heavy in the SEC. It is insanity. So I think Billy Napier is a guy who I want to be successful. And I think part of Billy Napier's issue at Florida is, one, the standards of Florida are very, very high. And as Texas fans, we understand that. But I think he wanted to do a strip to the studs and build back up. But he also came in with such an inflated staff. Like, he has 40,000 coaches, it feels like. So people you see you spending money, they want results for it.
Yeah, 100%. And they kind of went all in this year, I feel like, because they got a decent transfer portal haul. They also got a pretty good recruiting class. And I think DJ Lagway is special. So to me, like I said, 9 wins for Billy Napier. Number 10 for me is Clark Lee. I think 1 year just can't erase what he's done at Vanderbilt. Like, he's won basically 2-3 games every year other than last year. And I think that has a lot more to do with Jerry Kill and Diego Pavia, and obviously gets both of them back this year. After they leave, we'll see who he truly is, if he's learned anything from those guys and maybe keeps that wacky kind of offense they run, and then also some of the things that probably Jerry Kill's taught him. But I have number 10 as Clark Lee right here. I think he could probably rise a little bit more, but I'm going to be honest. I think Vanderbilt's going to be a lot worse next year than they were last year. I think that offense caught a lot of people by surprise. I think Diego Pavia caught a lot of people by surprise. I just don't see that happening this year. So I have Clark Lee at number 10.
Yeah, and I'm with you there. I think it very much feels like Joey McGuire's first year in Lubbock, where they're very aggressive. They win a lot of coin flips. They win a lot of 4th downs. They get a lot of, and again, a lot of that, I say luck, but part of that's Diego Pavia making your luck, right? But that, I feel like that's what it is, where those coin flips, those 50-50s, they're going to come down the other way eventually. And I'm with you there. And I've got Clark Lee 1 spot higher. So I think we're pretty much in accord there, right? I've got Clark Lee next up on the list. And again, having a quarterback like Diego Pavia makes you look a lot smarter than you are or can be and have been. And that's no shots at Clark Lee. Again, I think he has the potential to be a great coach. But I think part of it is also what Vanderbilt is. Like, Vanderbilt is always going to be at a disadvantage as far as academics. Getting guys into the school is just tough, right? It is what it is. It's kind of like the Service Academy problem or the Georgia Tech problem. So it's just something that they have to compensate for and be aware of and compensate for. I would love to see them go eventually in that Kansas Jayhawks triple option situation, where it's kind of a spread triple option, because it allows you to do some more of that, get creative, keep people on the trips.
Yeah, I have number 9 is Mike Elko. I think he did basically like what you said. He did what Jimbo Fisher did, but Jimbo Fisher did that every year for 6 years basically.
Mhm.
So I think Mike Elko in his first year, I thought that he did a pretty good job, and the defense I thought was really good, and that's his calling card. If he can just get the offense, average and keep the defense keep going up every year, I think they can be a really good football team. So I have him at number 9. Number 8 for me is Shane Beamer. I think he's a really good motivator. I think he's a good recruiter. I don't know how good he is X's and O's, but this team easily could have been, they probably should have been 10-2 and in the college football playoff. Like that game versus LSU, they were hosed on that game. And they should, if Lenora Sellers doesn't get hurt, they'll probably win that game anyways. So I have Shane Bieber 8. I think he could definitely climb as high again as 4 or number 3 by the end of next year. If they go in, they achieve what I think they can achieve with the defensive talent coming back and Lenora Sellers coming back, who I think is a top 5 quarterback in the SEC and probably a top 10 quarterback in the country. I think you could rank him, like I said, as high as 3 or 4. And I think you could also say if they go 4-8 and he does what he's been doing before last season, honestly, and underachieving, he could be his like 14th or 15th. So I have him at number 8.
Yeah, and I'm close with you on that. And I think I got my numbers off. I think I may have done one extra while you were out because I'm on number 7 somehow. But Beamer is my number 7, right? We're pretty much in one accord there, right? I think Lenora, again, much like we talked about with Billy Napier, I think what Shane Beamer looks like and is coming out of this year, it rises and falls with his quarterback, right? And one of the most dynamic quarterbacks, like being able to grab that guy, what his development looks like in the offseason, what he's able to grow into, because at this point, I guess this point being like 2 months ago, he was very much a one read and run quarterback in a lot of ways, which works as a freshman and especially keeps people on their toes, right? Johnny Manziel basically won a Heisman doing that. So it is effective in the right lanes and avenues, but I'm curious to see what the development looks like, how they continue to build around it. I like a team that's a spread running team. So being able to run zone read, being able to run the quick options and the read options, something I appreciate and I enjoy. So I want to see more of that in their offense, roll in some RPOs, roll in some quick slants with that. And I really think that offense could be lethal. So I could see him rising up the rankings as we get into this time next year.
Number 7, I have Eli Drinkowitz. I think they overachieved 2 years ago, and I think they underachieved last year. So I think it kind of evens out. I think he's done a really good job at Missouri. Like, that's not an easy place to win football games. That's not a place that really has won football games other than the Chase Daniel era. So I think he's done a solid job. I don't think they're ever going to be a college football national championship team. Do I think once every 5 years, 6 years, you can get to a college football playoff? Yeah, I do. I think they can be that team. I think there's actually a couple teams like that in the SEC. I think South Carolina, Missouri, and Arkansas are those 3 teams for me. I think if they hit their peak every 5 to 6 years, you can sneak into the college football playoff. I don't think you're ever going to win a national championship. So if those are your expectations, I disagree with them. But if you told me, in a decade you got to the college football playoff twice, I can believe that from those 3 programs. I think that's definitely possible with the way they recruit, where they're at, and everything like that.
I would add Auburn to that list. I think historically, that's probably another team that I'd like to see that I think could be in that spot.
Number 6 for me, this is where we kick off. Brian Kelly. He has to fall. After last year, I think they blew a couple games. I think the Ole Miss game where they came back and won, they got very lucky in that football game as well. Listen, back-to-back years, you had Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, and Brian Thomas, and you couldn't get to the college football playoff. That, to me, is a failure. Then you have Kyron Lacey, Garrett Nussmeier, that offensive line with a defense that had gotten better, and you still can't get to the college football playoff. I disagree, or I think that's wrong. I don't understand how you don't get to the college football playoff. Not even but back-to-back years. Could you have gotten there 1 year? 1 year with that amount of talent you had offensively, just kind of figured it out defensively, and he wasn't able to do that, honestly. So I'm very disappointed. I think this is the make or break year to me. If they don't make the college football playoff this year, I think they should fire Brian Kelly. Listen, it's impossible not to win at LSU. It really is. I saw Ed Orgeron win a national championship at LSU. Ed Orgeron, and he is not a good football coach. I saw Les Miles win a national championship and get to a national championship at LSU. He is not a good football coach. So for Brian Kelly not to be able to do either one of those things, to me, is a disaster. It's a failure. He deserves to be fired if he cannot do it.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I have him at 6 as well. I think Brian Kelly, you can't be that unlikable and also be the first coach to not win a national championship. Of the like, I have it right. Like the last 3 or 4 coaches there have at least won one national championship, right?
Yeah.
Brian Kelly is on the verge of breaking that streak. And it's wild to me. And I think the comparison of him leaving Notre Dame to go to LSU and then Notre Dame 2 years later getting to the national championship game, like that to me is proof positive that I think Brian Kelly is not going to get it done at LSU. It feels like he may be a limiting factor rather than somebody who's going to get the job done for them.
Yeah, it's funny because everyone thought the limiting factor was Notre Dame and they could only win 10 games because of academic standards, that and so forth. And I thought that. I really believe that. Then this year disproved that. And if Marcus Freeman's able to win 10 or 11 games next year, it's going to disprove it even more. Like you said, the limiting factor may have just been the guy on the sidelines. It may have been Brian Kelly. And I think next year's going to tell us a lot. If Notre Dame's able to win 10 or 11 games, they don't have to get back to a national championship. But if they do that, and then Brian Kelly only wins 9 or 10 games, doesn't get to the college football playoff, it's pretty clear it was Brian Kelly. And honestly, at that point, I could see him retiring because he's going to get fired. He's going to get a big buyout. And I don't really see anyone hiring him that or a job that he would really want.
Yeah. Take the buyout and then retire.
Who's your number 5?
I've got Kalen DeBoer at number 5. I think it's too early to call. And I think as much as I love Jalen Milroe, DeBoer's style and Jalen Milroe just don't really go together in a substantive way. Alabama's going to be Alabama. The recruiting is still pretty solid. I think Alabama fans, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, Nick Saban has broken all of our brains as it comes to what fair expectations are for a college football program. It's not going to happen again, ever. It didn't happen before, really, in the modern era, and it won't happen again. So I think Kalen DeBoer, I think unfairly it's hard to be the guy after the guy, right? And Nick Saban is the GOAT, right? He is the absolute greatest of all time at this level. And so having Kalen DeBoer have to step in and have a year in which they missed the college football playoff feels disastrous, but they were a couple of breaks away. I think the biggest black eye for me is that OU game. Like that shouldn't happen. That shouldn't have happened. If they win that game, they're in the playoffs. Like, but again, I don't think they're very far off. I think DeBoer getting a quarterback that fits what he wants to do a little bit more schematically will be a benefit for them. Alabama's still Alabama. They're still going to recruit. They still got a lot of the infrastructure there. Again, I think part of the issue is also when and how Saban left. I've said it, I've alluded to it a couple of times, but like Nick Saban did not leave them in a good and advantageous spot to grab a coach, to grab portal players, to grab portal quarterbacks, to grab pieces that they needed. So he was a bit behind the 8 ball coming in. So I'm willing to give him some benefit of the doubt this year. Now, if we see them lose dumb games again this next year, he's going to slide down the list.
Yeah, so I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt because of what I've seen. So I don't have him ranked that low. I do have him one spot higher. So when we get to 4, I'll talk about him a little bit. But number 5, I have Josh Heupel. I think Josh Heupel's done a really good job at Tennessee. I don't think he's overachieved. I think he's done honestly exactly what I expect from Tennessee. Get into a college football playoff now. Maybe next year, the year after, get to a college football playoff and advance to like a Final Four. I don't see Tennessee is a team that wins national championships quite often. That's just not their history. So, maybe get a national championship in like a 15-year tenure at Tennessee, and that's a really good job. So I think he's done a good, solid job at Tennessee, and he's done a much better job than anyone since Philip Fulmer, I believe, was the head coach at Tennessee. So I think he's done a good job. So I have him at number 5. And like I said, number 4 for me is Kalen DeBoer. He's just done way too much winning at every level for me not to have him in the top 4. And honestly, if he would have won one more game, I'd probably still have him in the top 2. I think he was either my second or third best coach in the SEC last year because the guy wins no matter where he's at. He won at Fresno State. He won at Washington. He won at Division II, Division III before that. I think he's a really good football coach, and he finally is going to have whatever quarterback he desires in the next couple of years. That's how I'm going to judge him, and he did a fantastic job with his type of quarterback and Michael Penix. I expect that. I don't know if I expect that with Ty Simpson because that's who I think is going to be the quarterback next year. Let's see how he does with Keelan Russell. If Keelan Russell hits and does really well, then I think he deserves a lot of credit for that, especially since he kind of jumped on him semi-early. Like, he still wasn't really getting recruited very heavily. It was really just SMU, and then Alabama came in out of nowhere. And then about a month or two later, you saw other schools take notice and then give him offers. So we'll see how Kalen DeBoer does. Who is their number 4 for you?
I had Josh Heupel. So you and I just kind of flip-flop those. I think Josh Heupel is one of the better offensive minds in the country. I think the way that he runs offense, the way that he runs that team, I think there are pretty obvious gaps in how they run and what they want to do. But when he's got the right pieces, there's nobody I think more deadly, or maybe one or two people at best more deadly than him, calling and scheming up an offense when he's got the right quarterback, when he's got the right tools at his disposal. I think they are. It honestly feels like the Diet Coke version of Lincoln Riley OU, where like if they could put together a defense that does what they need them to do and lets the offense not have to score 11 billion points to win, I feel like they're doing a great job. So like that is something to keep an eye on. And again, I think they've got a lot of pieces on the defense. They had a lot of talent this year, but it just felt like they didn't do as much with that talent as I hoped.
Yeah, I also think Nico just has to get better at not one read. It was always one read from him, and then if it wasn't there, he struggled. So if he gets past that, I think he'd be fine. And I think that is also an indictment on Josh Heupel going forward. Like, if he doesn't get better, you recruited him, you're the offensive guru. How is he doing?
Freshman quarterbacks will get better, hopefully, with Josh Heupel, because that's what he does.
Yeah. Number 3, I have Lane Kiffin. I think Lane Kiffin is the third best coach in the SEC. It's funny because I don't think he's a national championship winning head coach. I've said this multiple times on this channel. I've said this multiple times when I was doing the SEC show. I think he's a good football coach, and I think he's going to win you 10 to 11 games, and I think you can get to a college football playoff. I just don't think he provides the consistency in a week in and week out basis that leads to national championships. And I'm talking on the field and off the field. You see that with his behavior off the field. It's fine if you like it. It's fine if you don't. But I just name me a coach that has won a national championship that does that. In any sport. Really, there's only one I can think of, and he's coaching college basketball at UConn. Dan Hurley is the only one I can think of that kind of acts like a petulant child all the time and wins the national championship. I don't know any NFL coach that won a Super Bowl doing that. I don't know any college football coach that won a national championship doing that. I don't know a Major League Baseball manager that did that. So the only one is Dan Hurley. He's an outlier because he's a fantastic X's and O's guys. Is Lane Kiffin such a savant X and O's wise that he can overcome that? Possibly. I don't think he is because I don't even know if he's better than Steve Sarkisian. So he's my number 3.
If I had consistent grading on this, I'd probably have Lane Kiffin lower because I could fault Lane Kiffin for some of the things that I put down other guys for. Like they had a really talented roster this year. They had a very expensive roster this year and didn't do much with it. But I think from what they expected Ole Miss, and I think what they can do at Ole Miss, I think Lane Kiffin has done a good job of getting most of the toothpaste out of the tube, and that's kind of how I'm judging it. They could have been a lot better this year. They probably should have been a lot better this year, again, with some of the talent they brought in, and I think that is always going to be, at least at this point, what we've seen from Lane Kiffin. The story of Lane Kiffin is like they were good, but they should have been great, right? They were good, but they should have been great, and that's what we've seen from him. And again, I like Lane Kiffin. I think he is a very smart coach. I think he's very he's trying to build a brand, and I think in a way that could be savvy. It doesn't play as well when you're not winning, or at least competing for conference championships. So just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I mean, the comment of, man, I don't know if I want to play in the SEC championship game, and then losing to Florida in the same week is so on brand for him. I mean, and it's kind of funny. It's like the Tom Herman thing. Like Tom Herman did some stuff like, again, but when he did this to Drew Lock, guys like that don't win national championships. We should have all known at that point. It's like, yeah, I don't think that guy's going to win because I've never seen someone act like a fool on the sidelines and win, because it doesn't happen. Like I've seen guys yell at players. I'm not saying that. I'm saying acting like a 18-year-old yourself, because you're not an 18-year-old. You're supposed to be leading 18-year-olds, not acting like 18-year-olds.
You're a 48-year-old. Act like
that. Yeah. Number 2, this is where I have Sark. I don't think you can debate Sark at number 1. I don't think that there's a case for that because that's Kirby Smart. Whoop-de-doo. Who's surprised by that one? But I think you could probably drop, like, if someone told me Sark was the fourth best coach in the conference, fine, I can get behind that. If he's the second, I can get behind that. Anything lower than 4 to me, I just can't agree with. Like, I think you can make an argument for a Kalen DeBoer. I think you can make an argument for a Josh Heupel, but I think that's where it ends in a Lane Kiffin maybe. So maybe 5, but even Lane Kiffin hasn't done enough to me. I mean, the guy's got back-to-back college football playoff appearances plus back-to-back Final Fours. He's the only one that's done that under the new system. So he's done a fantastic job. So he's my number 2.
Yeah, I've got him there as well. And I think, the argument against Sark, I think, is like we want to see him do it again in the SEC, right? He did one in the Big 12, one in the SEC. So that's the argument of putting Sark lower on the list. But I think based upon on-field results, based upon trajectory of the program, I think where the arrow is pointed, I don't think you can put Sark any lower than that. Like it just Texas again is moving in the right direction. They've got the quarterback of the future. They have the quarterback of the present and the quarterback of the future. And now they've got the quarterback of the future and then the future's future in there.
Yeah.
The staff turnover has been minimal. They're maximizing, I think, in a lot of ways what they have on the roster. They're at the point where they built the roster to the point where they can be very selective with what they do in the transfer portal. And we've seen that as well. So I just think based upon all of the boxes that are checked, it feels like Sark has one big monkey on his back, and that's the guy that we both have at number one.
Yeah, he can't get over him. And hey, guess what? Not many people can get over him up until this point. The only one that could kind of consistently was his the guy that taught him everything, his mentor, Nick Saban. So number one for me is Kirby Smart. I don't think you can debate that. If they do have a fall off, like some people are predicting, like let's say they go 9-3, and Sark does again what he did last year, even if let's say they don't make the national championship, they just go back to the Final Four, and this time let's say they win the SEC, I think then the conversation can be had for number one. But for right now, it's a guy with 2 national championships, multiple SEC titles. They had a down year this year and still won the SEC, so I have to have him at number one.
Until somebody else is raising that conference championship trophy, that's all that needs to be said, right? He has gotten everybody's number, and the playoff run wasn't what we thought it could be and should be with that level of talent. But again, until somebody else is raising up that SEC championship trophy, there's nobody else you can put at number one.
100%. And that wraps it up, guys. Sark at number 2 for both of us, ranking every SEC coach. So again, guys, please hit that like button. Please subscribe.